Alicia Mercer scored $200,000 on Family Feud Fast Money, the highest single-round total in the show's 46-year history, and when Steve Harvey announced the number, she sat down on the stage floor without bending her knees first, like a building that lost its foundation, and said into the air above her, "God." Oh, God, not as an expression, as a conversation, because Alicia Mercer was a registered nurse who had been sleeping in her 2008 Honda Civic with her 2 children for 61 days. Not because she lost her job. She had her job. She drove to the hospital 5 days a week in that same car, took a shower in the hospital locker room before her shift, worked 12 hours, came back to the car, helped her kids with homework by the light of her phone, and tucked them in under the blankets she kept folded in the trunk. She was 38 years old. She made $51,000 a year before taxes. She had $214 in checking and $0 in savings. She had applied to Family Feud because her son Devin, who was 14, had said, "Mom, I read online that they give away a lot of money." Devin had written the application. Steve Harvey found out about the car 90 seconds before the buzzer rang on $200,000, and what he did next has never happened in 46 years of this show. It was a Friday in August 2022. The Mercer family had come to Atlanta from Memphis in the Honda Civic that was also their home. Alicia had folded the back seat blankets and put them in the trunk before they arrived at the studio. Devin's idea, though he hadn't said why, and she hadn't asked. Devin was 14, quiet and precise in the way that children become precise when their lives require precision. Her daughter Zoe was 10. Zoe had worn her best dress, the purple one, and had asked 3 times in the car whether she looked okay. She looked perfect. The team was completed by Alicia's coworker and friend from the hospital, Danielle, and Danielle's husband, Terrence. They were good people. They'd known something was wrong with Alicia's living situation for a while. Nurses noticed things, but Alicia had deflected every question with the same answer. "We're in a transitional period. It's temporary." It was temporary. She kept believing that. The reason Alicia Mercer and her 2 children were sleeping in a car in Memphis was not a single catastrophic event. It was the specific accumulation of events that life produces when it decides, without malice, to remove every cushion at once. Her ex-husband Marcus had stopped paying child support in March 2022. Not because of hardship on his end, the court documents would later show otherwise, but because he decided, apparently, that the arrangement no longer interested him. Alicia had filed with the state enforcement office. She'd been told the processing time was 90 to 120 days. It had been 61 days when they taped the show. She was still waiting. The apartment had been rented in both their names. When the child support stopped, she'd covered 2 months on her own. The 3rd month, she was $400 short. She'd asked the landlord for a 2-week extension. He'd said no. She'd called 211 3 times over the following 2 weeks. The first call had been put on hold for 40 minutes and then disconnected. The second call had referred her to a shelter that required her to check in by 5 p.m. and was located 22 miles from the hospital where she worked the 6 a.m. shift. The third call had put her on a housing wait list that the intake coordinator told her, gently, had a current wait time of 4 to 6 months. She'd moved into the car on a Thursday. She'd told Devin and Zoe it was an adventure. Devin had been 14 and known immediately. He'd said nothing. He'd started folding the blankets. She had not told anyone at the hospital. She had not told her mother in Jackson, because her mother was 71 and had a bad heart and the information would have been a medical event. She had not told Danielle, who would have insisted on Elisa moving in with her family, and Elisa could not do that. Could not do the thing where she became someone's burden. She had told no one. Every morning she drove to the hospital, showered in the locker room, put on her scrubs, and walked onto the floor. She was an EQ nurse. She held the hands of people who were dying. She told families the things families needed to be told. She kept her composure through 12-hour shifts that required her composure. And then she went back to the car and helped Devon with his algebra homework in the dark, and told Zoe that everything was going to be okay. Every night Devon looked at her with the expression of a boy who knows the truth and has chosen not to say it out loud because he can see that his mother needs him to not say it out loud. She never let either of them see her cry. She cried in the hospital bathroom at 3 a.m. when no one else was there. And that wasn't even the part that broke Steve Harvey. The part that broke Steve Harvey happened 90 seconds before the $200,000 was announced. During the fast money round, Steve had asked Alicia, in his standard between questions banter, "Where do you go to decompress? After a shift like yours, where do you come home to?" Alicia had said, quickly, "My car." Steve had started to move on and then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said. "Your car?" Devon, watching from the side of the stage, had closed his eyes. Alicia Mercer had maintained 2 years of careful deflection in the time it took Steve Harvey to ask one honest question. She looked at him. She looked at the camera. She thought about the 211 waitlist. She thought about the blankets in the trunk. She thought about Devon's algebra homework by phone light. "We've been living in the car," she said, "since June. 61 days. Me and my 2 kids." She didn't say it dramatically. She said it the way she gave information to families in the IQ, clearly, completely, without flinching. Devon applied for this show. He thought we might win enough to get an apartment. The studio fell completely silent. 300 people, hardened television professionals, had stopped what they were doing. A camera operator lowered her camera and stood with her face in her hands. Steve Harvey did not speak for 11 seconds. "You're an EQ nurse," he said. "Yes. You hold people's hands when they're dying." "Yes, and you go home to a car." "Yes." Steve Harvey pressed his handkerchief to his face and turned his back to the audience. He stood that way for 7 seconds. When he turned back around, his eyes were wet, and his voice was low, and the performance was entirely gone. "Play the fast money," he said to the control room. "Right now. We're playing fast money." The show had not been at the fast money round. It was mid-game. Steve had never, in 12 consecutive years as host, triggered fast money mid-game outside of its scheduled slot. The control room was silent. "I said play it," Steve said. "Right now." They played it. Alicia Mercer answered every question in fast money with the speed and precision of a woman who has spent 14 years making accurate calls under pressure. Her score, $200,000. Exact, the highest in the show's 46-year history. When Steve announced the number, Alicia sat down on the floor. She said, "God." "Oh, God," and then she covered her face, and she stayed there on the floor of the Family Feud studio, and she let herself cry, for the first time, she would later say, in 61 days. Devon ran onto the stage. He didn't ask for permission. He ran from the side of the stage and got down on the floor next to his mother and put his arms around her and said, "Mom. Mom. We got it. We got it." Zoe ran from the other side and threw herself into the middle of the pile. Danielle was crying. Terrence was crying. 300 people were on their feet, and none of them were quiet. Steve Harvey knelt down on the stage floor next to all 3 of them, in his best suit, and said nothing. He just knelt there. He wasn't done. When Alicia could stand up, Steve took both her hands in his. "Let me tell you something," he said, "and I want you to hear every word of this." He looked at her directly. "I was living in my car for 3 years, 1985 to 1988. Ford Tempo. I know what it is to lock the car door at night and pretend that was your plan all along. I know what it is to carry that secret every day, because you are more afraid of being seen as failing than of failing. I know that exact thing." He paused. "You are not failing. You are one of the most extraordinary human beings I have ever met on this stage. You show up to hold dying people's hands while your children sleep in your car. There are not words for what that costs." He pulled out his phone. He called his real estate liaison, not a charity, his personal real estate contact, and told him he needed a furnished apartment in Memphis, 3 bedrooms, available immediately, lease covered for 12 months. He said it clearly, on air, to everyone in the room and everyone watching. His producer made a sound. Steve talked over it. He wasn't finished. He announced that Devin Mercer's college education, 4 years, full tuition, fees, and housing, was covered by the Steve Harvey Foundation, effective today. He looked at Devin specifically when he said it. Devin, 14 years old, who had written the application and folded the blankets and never let his mother see him afraid, stood completely still and nodded once, slowly, like he was accepting a very serious responsibility. Steve looked at Zoe. "And for you, baby," he said, "we've got 4 years waiting too. Because your brother applied for both of you." Zoe Mercer grabbed her brother's arm and held on. Both families received the full prize package. The opposing family captain, a man named Gerald from Charlotte, told his family to stay on their side of the stage, and then crossed it anyway, walked to Alicia, and said, "You deserved that. You deserved every dollar." 3 months after that Friday, Alicia Mercer and her children were in a 3-bedroom apartment in Memphis. First morning there, she made breakfast on an actual stove. She'd forgotten how long it took to boil water on a stove. She'd been using a hot plate in the car for 2 months. She stood at the stove and watched the water bubble up, and she called her mother in Jackson and told her everything. Her mother did not have a heart event. Her mother said, "Baby, I knew something was wrong. I've been praying." The episode aired 6 weeks after the taping. The clip of Alicia sitting on the floor and Devin running from the side of the stage was viewed over 320 million times, making it the most viewed moment in the show's digital history. The hashtag #DevinApplied trended globally for 9 days. Major news outlets ran investigative follow-ups on the systemic housing and child support enforcement failures that had placed a working nurse in a car with her children. A year after the taping, the Devin Mercer Housing Initiative was established, named for the 14-year-old who had done what his mother couldn't do and asked for help. Focused on providing emergency housing navigation and short-term housing for working families facing sudden homelessness. In its first year, the initiative helped 850 families avoid or exit vehicle homelessness across Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi. Today, Alicia Mercer still works in the ICU at her Memphis hospital. She takes the same route to work she always did. She parks in the same parking garage. But now she parks and goes upstairs to an apartment she pays for herself. The child support enforcement finally came through in February, and she makes coffee and looks out the window and thinks about nothing in particular, which is a luxury she had not understood was a luxury. Devin is in his junior year of high school. He has a 4.1 GPA. He wants to study biomedical engineering. He still folds blankets very neatly before bed. He says he doesn't know why. Steve Harvey, reflecting on that day, said in 46 years of Family Feud, nobody has ever scored $200,000 in fast money in the middle of the game. We don't do that. But I need to be clear, I did not do something unprecedented. Devin did. He picked up his phone when his family needed help, and he applied to a game show. A 14-year-old boy did what a lot of grown people would not have done. He asked for help. And I am just the man who happened to be standing there when the right door opened. He paused. I was him. 30 years ago, I was him. Trying to figure out how to get his mother out of the car. Some children carry more than any child should carry. And some children, quietly, precisely, without asking for credit, carry it anyway, and fold the blankets and apply to the game show. And wait. Devin Mercer waited 61 days. The door opened on a Friday in August. If this story about a nurse, her son, and the $200,000 that changed everything moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that asking for help is not weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing a person can do. Have you ever seen a child do something that humbled every adult in the room? Let us know in the comments and ring that notification bell. Because as Devin Mercer proved, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply pick up the phone and ask.